Well, it's my pleasure to welcome on the show this week Mark Meckler with Citizens for Self-Governance. Mark, you have a great new project called Open the States, where you're providing tools to activists and citizens who are engaged in trying to reopen states from all of these coronavirus government shutdowns. And then you've been out there, networking and connecting with folks. It's really exciting what y'all are seeing.
Yeah, look, Tony, this is for me is kind of where I live, in the middle of the activist movement. Grassroots folks are my folks. I'm just a grassroots guy. And when I saw this whole thing rising, it reminded me of my experience way back when in the Tea Party movement. A bunch of us spontaneously organizing. We had no tools. We had no experience. We didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that we were frustrated and something needed to change. And that's where folks have been in this reopen movement. We've seen great independent groups springing up all over the country. They're self-funded, they're self-starters, and they're not being coordinated by anybody. And I wanted to give them a place and a platform where they could be safe from the censorship of Facebook. We've seen some big censorship of Facebook around this issue, and also where they could have some organizing tools. So there are forums there. Each state has its own forum. There's a calendar where they can list their events, and there's a chance for them to network in these forums. We also have a state leaders forum, so the state leaders can communicate with each other, share best practices and ideas. So that's what's going on at openthestates.com right now.
Well, and what's coming out of this, and you were explaining, is pretty exciting. Folks are, sheltered in their homes. They maybe connect with a handful of family members, and maybe they're part of a group or something like that, but they're not necessarily seeing that there is this nationwide movement, a nationwide effort, and it's really coming into action right now.
It is, and I'm really excited about it because it's just natural. This is what grassroots activism is at its best. It's organic, it's natural, it's spontaneous. And so now that these people are in touch with each other, we've been doing regular Zoom calls to get leaders on the calls together, face to face, get to know each other. What's happening is they've made a plan. And this is what grassroots do. You put them together, put them in a room, and they figure out what they want to do. And what they've decided is enough waiting, enough complaining, enough protesting. It's time to reopen the country. So they've set a date and they have a plan and they're ready to go.
So let's talk about that. I mean, it's a date nationwide that folks are trying to coordinate around to say, this is the day we're going to, if we have a business, we're going to reopen our business. If we're maybe don't have a business, we're going to go visit that business.
Yeah, and I would also add, if we're a house of worship, we're going to open and we're going to allow our congregants to come in and worship, because that's one of the things that's really been shut down all over the country. So basically what they've done is they've chosen May 22nd. That's this coming Friday. And there's a reason for that. One is just, enough. They're sick and tired of it and they're ready to go. And these businesses are not going to survive much longer. A lot of them have already been lost. But a second reason is this is Memorial Day weekend. And it's important that we remember that's not about picnics and barbecues. It's about those who signed on the dotted line and were willing to risk all for the country and for the Constitution. And some gave all. And we're supposed to remember those people and honor those people on Memorial Day weekend. And right now, all the rights that they fought to secure, that they sought to protect, that they were willing to die for, are being challenged now. The right to freedom of assembly, the right to freedom of travel, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. All of these things are being challenged. And so it seemed like a good weekend, according to all the activists I talked to, that we ought to honor those people by standing up and claiming those rights. They belong to us. They were secured for us by people who gave their lives. So we're going to stand up and fight for those May 22nd.
Yeah, I mean, people are worried about health consequences and things like that, but we're talking about generations of people who put their lives on the line, literally, to defend these rights. And then here we are, all we're suggesting is to go have a hamburger or something, to do your part to actually defend and fight for and fulfill the rights that are so important to us as a society. It's if you put it in context, it's kind of the least you could do.
Exactly. And so here's the structure of the thing. People are talking about we need to stand up, open up, and show up. And by stand up, what we mean is that everybody, all of us, you, me, and everybody else, we need to stand up together in unison and say enough is enough. We've had it. We're done with this. We did this because you told us to, and you told us we had to do it to be safe. But we now know the way the numbers have borne out, the way things are right now, it's time to get back to our regular lives. Number two is we're encouraging business owners to open up. It's pretty scary out there. If you're a business owner, they're threatening you with police action. They're threatening with license removal. They're threatening cease and desist, and in some cases, even jail. We saw with Shelley Luther here in Texas. That's not the only person who's been jailed around the country. And so what we want is we want all these business owners to open at once because there's protection in numbers. The government authorities can play whack-a-mole with one or two businesses, but if 1 or 2,000 open up across the city or 10,000, really not much they can do as far as enforcement. If we all stand together, then we all stand together, right? And so that's the goal, is get all these businesses to open. And the last part is show up. And the reason it's show up, this is the part you're talking about, go out and buy a hamburger, is that we have to go patronize those businesses. They're hurting. These are your neighbors. These are folks you go to church with, your kids play soccer or Little League with. We got to go out and patronize local business. I can tell you, for my part, Tony, we, like most people, we've been at home. We haven't eaten out near as much. We haven't shopped local near as much. I've saved a bunch of money. My plan is starting Friday to spend that money this weekend with local businesses. And I don't mean Walmart or Home Depot. And I'm nothing against those businesses. Great businesses. They stayed open for us. I appreciate it. But now I'm going to be shopping local and supporting local. That's what I mean by showing up.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. And I love the unity that's here. A lot of people have been coming to me. I'm an attorney, of course, and saying, well, what should we do? Should we sue? Should we go to the courts? And you go, look, okay, if you want the courts to validate what you're doing 6 months from now, maybe we can put together a lawsuit. But the real action is if you see something that's going on where there's this unconstitutional restriction on your activity, and you really believe, look, this is unconstitutional and illegal, defiance is really the only answer. And unified, collaborative defiance in this way is how you can actually defeat these kind of illegal policies. So very exciting to see people banding together, not just in one town or one community, but nationwide around this May 22nd. Coming out party. Let me ask you this. So what are you seeing from new participants, new activists? I mean, you mentioned that this kind of reminds you of the early Tea Party days back in 2009, 2010. I've actually heard that from a couple of other folks who say, look, there's a lot of new people getting involved, and that's always a really, really good thing. What are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, I have my anecdotal evidence, which is just my feel for this thing, because I'm spending pretty much all day, every day on the phone with folks like this. And then we commissioned actually a deep dive study by Frontier Center on this to figure out what was really going on. Here's what I found by the numbers. 38% of people who identify very strongly favorably with the movement, meaning they've either been to a protest or would consider going to a protest, these are people who've never even heard of the Tea Party movement or never participated or didn't have an opinion on it. And I think that's really exciting. This is not just Tea Party 2.0. It's not the same people coming out. These are newly minted activists. A lot of people never engaged in politics before. A full 28% of them are actually registered independents. So there's this picture they're painting. It's a big MAGA thing. And certainly there are people out there who support the president, but it's a bunch of new people, independent people who've never been engaged in politics before. And when we talk to them, and even when we do these deep dive interviews with them, what we're finding is there are two main things motivating them. One is it's a self-definitional moment. They're looking in the mirror and asking, who am I? Am I the kind of a person who's willing to stand up to tyranny? What do I want my kids to think about me and my neighbors and my spouse and my friends? What do I want them to remember about me in this moment? This is a history moment. They're actually comparing themselves with great figures in history. Am I one of those people? And I think that's phenomenal. And the second thing that they're doing is much more selfless. And I really love this. They're saying, it's my duty to do this for others. And a lot of folks who are Christian are saying it's their Christian duty. But even folks who don't identify themselves as practicing a particular faith, they're saying it's their duty. It's their duty to take care of people who are out of work, who are struggling or having to go to food banks, whose businesses are being ruined. They see themselves as standing for others. I think these are two really healthy signs for America.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really teachable moment in self-governance. The good things that we've seen happen, and we've talked a little bit about this with Empower Texans, the good things we're seeing are self-governing things. And I think people are a little bit having to come to grips with the idea that, okay, the government says it's going to pile it in and dump a boatload of money on everybody to try and make it better, but it just doesn't really even work. Even if the money's there, how do you get it out there to people? How do you do those things? So it's been a teachable moment to people of hey, look, this is how communities work. We have to support each other. It's not something that we can just lean back and let the government, turn a on-off switch with the economy and then dump cash on it. It just does not function that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the question becomes, what's the future look like? And that's really what worries me more than anything else, but also gives me the most hope. There is something that's going to come out of this, Tony. I mean, we are never going back to normal, to what the old normal was. So when people pine for the old way, that's not happening again. We have a new paradigm in America. And the question is, what is it going to look like on a go-forward basis? I'm absolutely certain what the radical progressives and the leftists want it to look like, what the statists want it to look like. And that is a much smaller gilded cage for the American citizen, a place where they can, quote unquote, take care of you and tell you what to do and tell you when you can and can't leave your house and where you can and can't shop and who's essential and who's not. They're very comfortable with this and they want to retain this power. They might loosen the screws for a little bit, but they want us to be used to them exercising that. And I think that's a terrible narrative. And I know you do too. I know Empower Texans stands against that. So the question is, what's the new narrative? I think this is the new narrative. We live in a time now where the paradigm has been broken and where anything is possible. The only thing that's working right now is tearing down all the old restrictions on entrepreneurialism, on inventiveness, on the power of work ethic and individual responsibility. We see what's happened in the trucking industry. President Trump has removed the regulations there. It hasn't been a catastrophe. It's been a great success. We see the removal of regulations on the pharmaceutical industry. What used to take 3 years to approve through the FDA and $1 billion is now being done in a few weeks. Why would we ever go back? And we need to take that attitude, that kind of entrepreneurial frontier spirit, and we need to impose that on our government. And here in Texas, they need to strip back regulations. They need to get rid of a lot of occupational licensing. We're going to need to reinvigorate the economy, and we cannot do that under the old status quo. We need to gut the regulations and set Texans free to create a new future.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of risk that things could head in a negative direction. Everybody sees it, but there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to band together with our neighbors and affect some positive change out of this situation. And we're seeing that happening on the ground. Running out of time, tell folks who are listening at home, how can they get more involved with Open the States? Tell them again about the tools that they can get there. How do they get involved if they want to be involved in the movement that you've been talking about?
They can go to openthestates.com, and there all they have to do is choose their state. Of course, that's Texas, our home here, the great state of Texas. If they have friends that are interested around the country, there are forums for every state. They can go to the events calendar. They can look at what's going on. And over the next couple of days, they're going to see a lot of detailed information and a lot of media around this event to stand up, open up, and show up. And that is Friday, May 22nd. So go to Open the States. That's where they can get all the details, Tony, and all the tools.
Great. Appreciate the work you're putting in on this, Mark, and all the work that folks are doing out there. It's really exciting. Thank you.
God bless you, and thanks for having me.